God bless you, my brother. I just I just wanted to say I thank God for each and every one of you that are here and the points that you have brought forth. Thank God for you, Ty. Um, when we talk about that piece of with Vincent talking about listening to the facts and Pastor Holbrook saying how there needs to be listening. Um, my great grandmother was born in 1902 in Greenville, Alabama. And I remember sitting down with her when she was in her 90s doing an oral history with her. Um, when we talk about going to history, I want you to understand when we say go to history, we're not talking about go to Barnes and Noble. We're talking about there are living individuals right now that can tell you what that history was like and what it felt like. My mother-in-law was born in 1933, my father-in-law in 1927. The same gentleman that actually took Emmett Till's life tried to take my father-in-law's life on a couple of occasions. I want you to know that the history that's inside of the history books, most of us that are here, we're not far from that history. My great grandmother told me, I asked my great grandmother, I said, during the Great Migration, what was the most exciting thing about moving from the South to the North? And she said that a black man was able to have dignity. He did not have to step off of the sidewalk for little white children, take off his hat and bow his head down to them and call them sir and man. He was able to stand up and walk like a man. This is something that we have been saying from the time that we arrived on this continent. It's just to recognize us, recognize our humanity. Even with the abolishment of slavery, and I love what Penny was referencing pertaining to the Methodist Church, because we know of the history of Dr. Richard Allen. We know what happened to him and the reason why the African Methodist Episcopal Church, while it even began, it was because abolishment of slavery was one thing, and we recognize your humanity up to that point. But when it comes down to equality, that becomes a different issue, and that does become an education issue, and it is something. One thing that we have as at our church, as our vision and our mission, is to love God and all people, transform lives, and to deploy saints. The reality is, when you say that you're going to love God and all people, to love all people, you must sit down and have conversations. And what we must understand, that when we love someone, at times those that we love, we may disagree with, but disagreement does not have to mean division. We can still be unified while yet disagreeing on certain points and pursue the exact same goals.
All right. Miss Manning.
I think in going back to what might be missing right now, I think speaking as a white woman, I hear so many white people say, "Oh, well, it wasn't my ancestors. My ancestors didn't own slaves. My ancestors didn't do this." And I think we have to own our history. And there's a big difference between heritage and history. You can be proud of your ethnicity. I can be proud of where my ancestors came from, hundreds of years ago, but I still have to own what that ethnicity did. Um, and so I think something that is really missing is the white community coming together as a whole, saying, this is in our past. This is something that happened. And for me personally, it's not something that I talk about because I'm ashamed of it, but I have ancestors that were in the Klan. I have ancestors that went to cross burnings, and we have their robes and so on and so on. And I look back and I had relationships with those people. And I think now, what would that be like? They're no longer with me, but that's a history that I own. And I can step forward and I can realize that I have made those changes in myself. I have seen other families other family members make those changes and come around to the truth. But we still have to own what our ancestors as a whole did. And I swear, if I've got to listen to one more person say it wasn't my ancestors, then we're not going to move forward. We have to acknowledge what entire groups of people did in the past.
All right, thank you. The last question, briefly, where do we go from here? That's the question that we keep hearing. What are your thoughts on that? Pastor Constantino. Pastor Constantino?
Oh, sorry about that.
No, you're okay.
Button didn't click right. Really, that's where the rubber meets the road. Key words mentioned already throughout was listening and learning, and a big word going forward would be action. And if we're committed to one another and moving forward with the right change, our action has to require interaction with one another, but also first with God. The book that Pastor Matlock referred to, Dr. King used back in the 60s. And he understood out of Proverbs 14:34, he understood the principle that righteousness exalts a nation. And that means that religion doesn't exalt a nation, politics doesn't exalt a nation, education doesn't exalt a nation. Now, all these things are important, and the holistic approach I agree with 100%. They all need to be included, but at the bottom of all this, the foundation of all this has to be what God says is true and right. And that includes what he says is right. And that is, there's no way around it. We will continue to repeat history if we don't include what God says is true and right. And Miss Penny hit on a great point when she said about confessing our sins. And yes, we do have national sins to confess, but you break a nation down and it comes down back into cities, and it comes back into homes, and it comes back into families, and it comes down to our personal lives. And our nation will not be restored unless we all take this very personally and look at ourselves personally, and where in our hearts personally do we need to change and get things right according to what God says in his book. I believe that, I hold myself accountable first. I have to look in the mirror and hold myself accountable before I ask our congregation to do the same. And I believe that goes for all of us. Our action requires interaction, first with God and then with one another, and then out from there. Thanks.
Awesome. Miss Penny.
Well, I agree that we need to look at ourselves first. One of the things the students learn on Sojourn is that if I come back with an action plan, I can't expect other people to do something that I am not willing to do myself, or I'm not changing myself. The students learn that on Sojourn, this journey is not about the me. It's about people during the civil rights movement who put their lives on the line for all Americans. So they're challenged, what are you going to do? And how are you going to bring about change? So I think we all need to do that. And when we're talking with other people, when we're talking about changing policy, and that's why I say we need to look at our own groups, whomever we're involved with, just what are our diversity policies, and what do we need to change about them? What do we need to change about ourselves? Those of us who are white, looking at ourselves and admitting that, we have privilege, whether we want to acknowledge it or not, we have privilege, and what do we need to do to make that privilege extend to everybody? So I think that education is the key. I think we need to not let the momentum down. I think we need to keep pushing. William Barber also made the comment when I heard him then speak in Birmingham on the 50th anniversary of Bloody Sunday, that if you look at your circle of friends, the people who are around you, and if they all look like you, then you're pretty limited. And you need to make an effort to expand that circle. And it means, you don't just add somebody and say, this person is my friend, but it means that you do have heart-to-heart conversation, and you do listen, and you do aware. And just to share with one of my stories is that my kids are biracial, and not to say because of my white privilege, I never thought about having the talk with my sons. And my oldest son is 40, and it's only been in the last 2 years that it's really come home to me, Garrett, what you were talking about when your kids leave the house. My son makes a ton of money, but he flies from New Jersey, where he lives, to Michigan twice a month, not since the pandemic, but twice a month. And he gets in a car and a rental car and drives to Kalamazoo. And so in the last 2 years, I've worried about when he gets in that car and he drives across the highway where he knows nobody, you know, am I going to see him again? Is he going to come home or get back home at night? And you're right, nobody should have to feel that way. Nobody should have to have that stress or that worry. And all of us in this country need to realize that. So that's why education is the key, listening is the key too, but we've just got to persevere and work for policy change and action.
Mr. Matlock, Pastor Matlock.
Where do we go from here? The Bible that we teach from speaks a lot about hope and speaks a lot about faith. Hope is about what our heart is able to see and desire, and faith is about what our legs and our arms are willing to do about it. The Bible tells us that faith without works is dead. So where do we go from here? We all inside of our hearts have spoken about hope, but now we have to walk by faith. So where do we go? I go to my brother, Pastor Michael Constantino, who may have questions, and that just because he has questions that I might think that he should know, I am patient to understand that he just may not know, and he may do the exact same. Understanding that in our conversation that I am not there to demonize whiteness, nor is he there to defend whiteness. I am not there to try to reverse roles and elevate blackness above whiteness, but that we are able to sit down at common ground and to understand our humanity. So where do we go from here? We go to Pastor Michael Constantino. We go to Tom Conley. We go to my brother Vincent. We go to support Ty Powell when she puts together rallies. We go to Penny and we go to Tracy. We go to one another. And then once we come together, by seeing our mutual hope, we lock our arms together and we do just like that old song we sing. We have come this far by faith, leaning on the Lord. We walk together. We fight together. We cry together. Vincent talked about it, and Vincent, when I see him, I see his dad. And when I see his dad, I see how his dad and I grew up. And when I look at Tom, I see my parents and I see how they grew up. And Vincent and I, we are keepers of ancestral lore. We hold on to the pain that has been passed on to us, as well as have an understanding of what we presently feel. And what we are just desiring is that at heart level, where do we go from here? We continue this fight against what's at the root of racism, which is ignorance and hatred. We fight it with the weapons that we have. The weapons that we have in the Bible, it says that they're not of this world. They have divine power to demolish mindsets. So that's what we are up against. We're up against mindsets, and some of them have been set in for a long time. Thank you, Tracy, for talking to us about the difference between history and heritage. Many of us can look within our own family lines and see that there are some things that we just don't agree with. But we have got to own that and make the understanding and the distinction of saying that even though this is what we may have seen in our family line, we've made a conscious decision to go a different way.
Mr. Conley, then we'll have Miss Penny, and then Mr. Peterson.
Yeah, where do we go from here? I've already talked about, the possibility of getting a model like Nelson Mandela did in South Africa, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, where, everything that we talked about will be encompassed in that, starting at the top, because it has to start at the top. I mentioned earlier about us all being interconnected, and I'm just looking at this screen, and I'm like, wow, I'm connected to Vincent Peterson II through his father. I'm connected to Gary Matlock through his parents. I believe Ty Powell, she graduated from our charter school that we operate, Rivergate High School. and I sent her to DC to a Black College tour and to tour the Capitol. You know, and then Pastor Michael Castino, you know, he's in Liberty. I was the first Black school board member on Liberty. And so, and then Penny Wells, we talk about John Lewis, we talk about United Methodist. I believe my uncle was the first Black pastor in the United Methodist Church, Charles Frost. And so, you know, we got all these interconnections, and you know, I think that, you know, experience, you know, and just having those conversations sideline, as Pastor Matlock said, you know, I mean, I already have it. I'm already going to call Pastor Mike. I'm going to be calling you to just have a conversation, you know. So, you know, I'm just happy for that, and it kind of gives me strength in these tired moments, you know, to move on and keep it moving. And I'm going to go after this. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Conley. Miss Penny. And then we'll have final thoughts very briefly, because I think we're heading into an hour, but very great. This dialogue has been amazing. Miss Penny.
Thank you. I just want to pick up on what Garrick was saying, because, you know, Dr. King came out with the 6 principles of nonviolence. And certainly John Lewis is my role model as the epitome of a person who lives by the principles of nonviolence. And one of the principles says that nonviolence seeks to defeat the injustice and not the person. So I think we need to be, you know, very aware that when we are talking with people that we disagree with, that we need to know that we're not trying to put that person down. We're not trying to disrespect him, but we're working on trying to defeat the injustice. One of the 3 civil rights workers that was murdered after Freedom Summer in Mississippi, when they were getting ready to shoot him, and the guy was standing like 2 or 3 feet from him, and he knew he was going to be killed, he just looked at him and said, "I know just how you feel." And how do we know that he said that? Because the person he said it to later admitted that when he said that and then he went ahead and shot him, it just kind of ate away at his soul, that he was trying to make that human connection with him. He understood why he'd been taught to be racist, how he came to be that way, but just trying to make the connection. So I think that just when we're listening and when we're having conversations and we're working to bring about change, we have to remember that we're working on defeating the injustice or the injustices that exist, and not to defeat the person that's there, and to reach out and to love and understanding rather than with anger.
All right. Final thoughts.
I just want to say,
Final thoughts.
I just want to say that I thought this was a phenomenal conversation, and
Yes.
You know, it's definitely motivated me. And I would just say, you know, going from here is just embracing our roles, whatever our roles are in the community. There's work that can be done. If it's, you know, what Malaynia's doing right now, and I know I'm around policymakers, so it's my job to push policy, and pastors have a role, the historical society has a role, everybody has a role. So we just need to embrace it and all push forward. And when we all do that together, good things will come from it.
So good. Thank you. Tracy.
There we go. I think kind of picking up on a little bit of what Penny said is that owning who we are and where we come into this story, but we also have to remember that not only is racism learned, racism is taught, because you're not going to just learn something from scratch. So as we move forward, I think education is going to be the key. I think just like Vincent said, it's got to come from where we are. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. We don't need to step into roles that are not our roles. And we can use whatever platform we have to continue to move us forward. I think we can help to amplify voices. That's incredibly important right now. And it's just to keep this passion that so many of us have right now. We have to keep that passion burning so that it's going to continue and move forward, because if in a month from now we've all just kind of, you know, let it go and we're kind of back to where we were years ago, nothing's going to change. So you got to keep that passion inside, use your voice, amplify the voices around you, and just keep moving forward.
Right. Is that it, or anyone else? All right, Pastor Constantino.
Yeah, I really appreciate the opportunity to meet with all of you and to begin to build relationships. And I really believe that's a key word going forward. The Liberty Township Police Department has been proactive in trying to unite the community through relationships. We all know we don't do that perfectly, but we've got a starting point here. We've got starting points within our different areas of influence. And I'm really looking forward to what we can all do together. This whole group is a group of ones who've made commitments, and going forward, that's what we need. We need to make commitments to go forward to build relationships. So I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Pastor Constantino. Pastor Matlock.
I do appreciate this conversation. Pleased to meet all of you. I can't wait to actually have the opportunity to actually share space and perhaps a coffee. But Pastor Mike and I, Pastor Mike just this past Sunday came and had words, and he spoke to our congregation, and what a powerful word that he gave. But one thing that we've committed to one another is that our relationship with each other is not just about swapping pulpits. It's about actually rolling up our sleeves and getting down and dirty together. So this is what it comes down to. I just think of John Newton, who was once that guy that transported slaves across the Atlantic. But when God moved his heart, he wrote a song that we are able to carry with us all the way today. And I just believe that if we are able to give that to one another, that we will too be able to see how amazing God's grace is.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you.